Hello, everybody, and welcome back. It is the best one again, here with you to stream one of my all-time favorite games and review it. I don't know why I said stream it, but we are going to review it, of course. It is Pokemon Yellow, the very first Pokemon game I personally ever played. My dad was happy enough to give me a Game Boy Advance, and I plugged in the big old Pikachu Special Edition Yellow into my blue Game Boy Advance, flipped it on. I didn't have a Game Boy that used batteries, but you know, where else to start other than with a good old Pokemon Yellow? And without further ado, let's get into it. So basically, Pokemon Yellow, it was the first Pokemon game I ever played. I had never played Pokemon before. I had watched the show actually, and I have watched and played now Pokemon Yellow at the same time, which was extremely fun to do. Um, but the thing I loved most about Pokemon Yellow is now that I've played other Pokemon games, of course, my favorite part about it is you literally get to feel like you're playing like Ash, because not only is your starter Pikachu and your rival Gary essentially gets a Eevee, but you also throughout the game get access to Squirtle, Charmander, and Bulbasaur, and they all get gifted to you. Like almost right before the second gym, honestly. You can get well, not all of them. You can get all but uh I think you can get everything but Squirtle actually before the second gym. After the second gym, you can get Squirtle, which is right before the third gym, which is Lieutenant Surge. But anyway, Pokemon Yellow, it sparked such, from a young age, it sparked such a sense of wonder and fun playing these Pokemon games. I remember I played Pokemon Yellow so much that the game card actually got corrupted and I could no longer save my game. So if I wanted to play Pokemon Yellow, I basically had to beat the game with leaving my Game Boy on. And the bad part about that, if you, for those of you that have played with a Game Boy and had one of those big cartridges such as like Gold, Silver, Crystal, or Red, Blue, and Yellow, if you hit or slightly tap them while they're playing the game freezes and gets corrupted because the connectors come loose. So you have to be very careful. And I basically remember I would play my Game Boy on a table flat, and I would just press the buttons and move around while it was connected to a charger. And then whenever I would stop playing, I would just flip the thing down and then turn the volume all the way down and then come back to it later while it was charging, because it was the only way I could continue without losing all my progress. I did eventually, my mom and dad did eventually get me another Pokemon Yellow cartridge because I didn't like the fact that my Game Boy would become hotter than coffee, essentially, just being left on the table all day, because there would be days I wouldn't play it. But yeah, it would become extremely hot from constantly playing as well as constantly being charged at the same time. So, that may have caused some issues, but that's not the game's fault. But essentially, the story of Pokemon Yellow is as followed. If you've ever played a first generation Pokemon game such as Red, Blue, Yellow, or Leaf Green, Fire Red, or the Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee, it all essentially follows the same progress line. You start in Pallet Town, and from Pallet Town, you go get a parcel for Professor Oak after he gives you your first Pokemon. Depending on the game you're playing, if you're playing Pokemon Yellow, which is what we're talking about, you automatically start with a Pikachu. There's no other starter you can get in Pokemon Yellow unless you hack the game or cheat it or whatever. But your starter in Pokemon Yellow is a Pikachu. You move on from there, you get his parcel, and you bring it back to Oak. He gives you the Pokedex, and he says, go out into the world and catch as many Pokemon as you can so we can have the data. Okay, fair enough. So we're giving 10-year-olds the ability to catch a bunch of wild animals. Cool. That's the joke that everyone takes with it. You eventually leave from Pallet Town and you go off to the gyms, and Pewter City, and Celadon City, all of these different cities that have gyms, and they all have typing. The first gym you fight is of course a rock ground type gym, which is owned by Brock from the anime or from the show that you may remember eventually follows Ash. Sadly, you do not get any human companions in the game. It is still played fully solo. You are following the steps of Ash, but you're still playing canonically as the Pokemon trainer Red, and you're facing Pokemon trainer Blue slash Gary in this game because he does use Gary's team, which does have some pretty cool concepts. So basically, when you face Gary, depending on how many times you lose and when you lose, will determine what his Eevee evolves into. If you lose to him too many times, his Eevee becomes a Vaporeon. If you win against him too much, his Eevee becomes a Jolteon. And if you just kind of like even it out and average it, his Eevee will actually become a Flareon. So obviously, if you want the easier fights, you want to lose to him, and that way at the end of the game, when it actually becomes required that you beat him, he'll have a Vaporeon, and then you can just wipe the floor with him. But if you want a harder one, then obviously just go for the kill and beat him, and he'll have a Jolteon instead. Or Flareon, depending on how many times you win and lose against him. There's really not any good or bad about it. He's still relatively easy regardless how you play, but Pokemon Yellow was the first game where I had to use type advantages and had to understand what typings affected what. Of course, like always, psychic types, confusion, psychic, those moves were always one-shot kills with everything. Razor Leaf was always guaranteed critical hit. And then as you keep playing through the game, you eventually get access to a little bit of story. You do eventually run into Jesse and James in this game. This was the only game that involved Jesse and James as like the Rocket Grunts and Mountain Moon. I don't think you ever fight them again, other than when they appear in Mount Moon, actually. From that point on, they just don't exist. At least I can't remember running into them again. But from Rockets, you also fight Giovanni, of course, and all the different gym leaders, eventually culminating in you getting all 8 badges. And once you get all 8 badges, you then go to the Elite Four. You find out that the 8th gym leader is ran by none other than Giovanni himself, and it's actually like a training simulation set up to find the next Rocket Grunts. Which was like a huge sort of like, oh no, you mean the bad guy runs a gym? That's crazy. But after you beat him and you go to the Elite Four, you face the Elite Four, and who is the champion? None other than your rival. You beat your rival just after he becomes the champion, only to rub it in his face that he is no longer the champion, and you get taken back and you become the new Elite Four champion. And from that, you basically have full reign over whatever you want to do. You can go catch all the legendaries you missed, which is like all the legendary birds, which is Articuno, Moltres, and Zapdos, and Mewtwo if you wanted to. There is actually a secret way to get Mew within Pokemon Yellow, involving like a little, I think it's like a glitch within the game that you can spawn Mew in. Because his code is in the game, it's just he doesn't spawn normally. But there's that. But as for like the game, like rating it itself, I personally give this game a solid 9. Like, I mean, it's a good Pokemon game. It's a good starter Pokemon game. It's my favorite Pokemon game because it's Pokemon Yellow. I absolutely adored playing this game so much. I can't really say anything too bad about it. Like, obviously, like, they used a like color definitely comes into play when like you traverse screens, because you'll go from being like all blue and cerulean to green in the next route, or you'll go brown in the next route, or red. So like it did, all of the stuff did like really use like a lot of one shaded colors for basically saying like, hey, this is basically what this entire route and all the trainers and all the Pokemon are going to look like. And the sprites looked really good in battle, in my opinion. Like they look very beautiful pixel arted art, but they also in the actual Pokemon Pokedex, when you're looking at them in your Poke Team, they take on the form of like plant, beast, bird, generically what they represent essentially as like their creature type, which I always thought was pretty cool, and I wish they would kind of keep that in game, but it's completely fine that they got rid of it. This game also didn't have an XP all or XP share all. It just had one XP share that would go to one Pokemon. which I personally adore. I think the Pokemon games now that have the XP shares, I'm not gonna hate on them like I know a bunch of people do. It don't bother me. The only thing I wish is I wish you could turn them off, because every so often I don't like to feel like I'm overpowered just because I've been fighting all these trainers and all of my Pokemon have been leveling up. So that's just my personal take on it. But other than that, I truly love Pokemon Yellow. I think Pokemon Yellow is an extremely fun game, and I highly recommend it for anyone who's never played it before. Um, but other than that, if you do have any sort of like comments or questions about Pokemon Yellow, or specifically another Pokemon game that I haven't touched on, please let me know. But there's not much more to talk about in Pokemon Yellow. It is a very fun game. It's, in my opinion, it stands up to time. Like, maybe not graphically, but um, nostalgically, it stands up to time. The fact that you get a Pikachu as your starter is always going to be fun, which is why Let's Go Pikachu is the funnest game to play on Switch. But again, it does have the XP all thing, so it's one of those that you kind of have to take with a bitter pill if you don't like that. But other than that, I do thank you all for watching and listening to my opinions on this game and my like little rant. I hope to get better and better at these, and as always, please leave your comments, likes, subscribes. Tell me if you have a different opinion. What's your favorite Pokemon? My favorite Pokemon, and it will always be this Pokemon, because it was the first time I actually like realized what typing was, which was in Sapphire. Um, yeah, I played Pokemon Yellow, then immediately jumped to Pokemon Sapphire, and still had no idea what typings worked. And it was the first Psychic type you get in Pokemon Sapphire, which is Ralts all the way to Gardevoir. Gardevoir is my favorite Psychic type. She just always seemed to do the most damage for me. I wasn't a fan of Alakazam. I was never a fan of Alakazam or the other Psychic type, Hypno. It just wasn't my thing. But as always, I'm going to end it here. Thank you all for listening to my little rant about Pokemon Yellow, and I hope you all have a great day.